What has happened, everybody? James Hancock here. Just got out of seeing Monkey Man, starring and directed by Dev Patel. And don't worry, I won't bury my feelings behind some endless preamble. I liked it. I really liked it. But I'm going to try and tap the brakes just to make sure that I don't oversell it or overstate what I liked about it. But suffice to say, I will never look at Dev Patel quite the same way again. And if he ever directs another movie, even if he doesn't appear in it, I will see it. And if you watch too many movies, it's very rare for an established star to surprise you with their creative decisions, but I think it says a lot about Patel's taste as well as his commercial sensibilities that he would make his directorial debut with just a mean and lean and nasty revenge action saga. Never mind the fact that he wanted Neil Blomkamp to direct. But when Neil Blomkamp passed on the project, he suggested that Dev Patel directed himself. And I think that he more or less nailed it. Like, I'm not going to declare this to be some overnight, instant, classic action movie. But if you like action movies, and I fucking love action movies, I've been watching them my whole life, it totally works. And I think it is vastly superior to the great majority of all the soulless, crappy franchise movies that are regularly churned out by the majority of Hollywood. This movie is brutal, it's violent, it's stylish, it's well shot, and best of all, there's a scene toward the end of the movie where for about 2 or 3 sustained minutes, I just felt this incredible rush of chills and goosebumps. And if you've been following my channel for any stretch of time, you'll know that I live for these moments where basically the performances, the visuals, and the music, they all come together so harmoniously that you get what I can only describe as like a rush of aesthetic pleasure. It's like a drug, but you're getting it from basically sight and sound as opposed to a chemical. But I live for these experiences. In the absence of those experiences, I would stop watching movies altogether. And most of my favorite movies have like multiple scenes that'll at least give me those chills like the first 2 or 3 times that I see it. But the fact that Dev Patel managed to direct a scene that was so satisfying and so enjoyable to me with his first time at bat, well, let's just say that Dev Patel is no longer the nice, talented kid that the world fell in love with back in Slumdog Millionaire. And now he's officially a bad motherfucker. And bad motherfuckers are a resource that are in very short supply in the movie biz these days. But if you like action movies, you don't want to see movies that are kind of soft and fuzzy. Like, you want to see Herculean, hulking masculinity on display. And while he's not quite hulking or Herculean yet, he is shredded and he is lean and he's very convincing as an action star. And it helps if your character that you're playing, Monkey Man, wears a mask, where if you need to do something really crazy, well, bring in the stuntman, put on the mask, and you're off to the races. But there are a few scenes where Dev Patel is working out without the mask, like whether he's like working out on the bag or just doing like some simple choreography, and he's convincing. So he was totally invested in the role, totally invested as a director, and I think, he can take a bow because he delivered a really cool movie. So if you don't know what the hell Monkey Man is, it's a pretty simple, straightforward story. And because it's an action movie, it's a thriller, that's precisely the kind of approach you want to take. Like, you don't want to overcomplicate things or like muddy the waters. Just deliver the goods. And you basically have a guy where once upon a time, when he was a little kid, you had these corrupt politicians with a corrupt police force basically pushing people off their land to develop it for whatever purpose. I can't even remember what that purpose was. So he grows up poor, and as if that wouldn't be traumatic enough for a young kid, his mother is killed during the kind of forced evacuation. So the character, Kid, I'm just going to call him Kid, but that's what he's called in the official description of the movie. But he's basically just trying to get by with whatever odd jobs he can get his hands on, one of which happens to be fighting in these underground fights. And I'm not even going to describe it as like no holds barred fighting, because they will use like bats covered in barbed wire. They'll use all kinds of gimmicks and weapons and crazy shit. And usually he's there just to get his ass kicked. He puts on the monkey mask, someone beats his ass, he gets a little payday, and then he goes back to his jobs, waiting tables and serving drinks and that sort of thing. He's just trying to survive any way that he can. But there's a big election on the horizon, and some of the people that were responsible for his mother's death, well, let's just say that the Monkey Man sets his crosshairs on them, and in 2 just glorious action sequences, one that's about halfway through the movie and one toward the end, he just wreaks havoc on these guys. He just raises hell, and they're little tiny action scenes kind of scattered throughout, especially in the underground fight scenes. But if what you're looking for is like those great action set pieces like you would see in a John Wick movie, where it's just like one scene seamlessly blending into the next, where he's using every household item around him, like with frying pans, whatever. Like, there are 2 big action scenes that are on that level. The movie's probably more brutal than stylish, like obviously with the John Wick movies. They're very slick, and they have a very specific style of choreography that is no longer unique to John Wick because a lot of people have been copying it. But what I liked about Monkey Man is that there's some brutality in here where there was one scene that was so gross and so brutal, I just started cracking up, and I had to I almost gave it like a standing ovation, but I didn't want to, I was in the front row, I didn't want to stand in front of the screen, but I just started laughing and clapping, and I don't know if the rest of the audience, if they were misinterpreting my laughter, but when I see something that I really enjoy, just a great bit of showmanship, I will crack up. And I just loved how Dev Patel was so willing to show us some pretty horrific violence that you would expect to see like in an R-rated Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie, not in a modern day action movie. But also, I'm just relieved that I got to see it in the theater because back in 2021, Netflix bought the completed film. They had the worldwide rights, and they were describing it as John Wick in Mumbai. But sometime after, Jordan Peele saw the film and decided to buy the film through Monkey Paw Productions away from Netflix and put it out in theaters through Universal Pictures. And I think that's pretty goddamn ballsy. It says a lot about Jordan Peele, and it says a lot about Dev Patel, but I think it's cool how Netflix was like, all right, you know what, take the movie. If you really want to go theatrical, take the movie, do your thing. So I hope that their faith in this project will be rewarded. I hope Universal will feel like it was money well spent. I saw the movie just a good old-fashioned regular AMC theater, and I think my theater was more or less like half full, but New York is always a really bad way to judge how a movie might perform because New York has a lot of foot traffic. People just wander around the city, stumbling into movies, and also there's just a lot of really diehard movie fanatics that live in this city. I mean, we've got art house theaters, we've got revival theaters, we've got museums, we've got IMAX theaters, like any kind of movie-going experience you could possibly want. New York is the best city in the country when it comes to the movie-going experience, apart from the fact that some people just treat the theater like it's their car where they can just like throw trash everywhere and talk on the phone and blah, blah, blah. But that's another concern for another day. But I feel like if you go to an AMC, that is a good way to judge like the relative level of interest in a particular movie. So my hope is that the action fans out there who like movies like The Night Comes for Us or The Raid or John Wick or any big action movie from the last 15 years, or even like some of the episodes from Gangs of London where you had the filmmakers from The Raid working in TV, but if you like that level of brutality and violence and excitement, I think Monkey Man will be right up your alley. And if you consider yourself a connoisseur of the action genre, where you've been basically watching action movies from like the last 100 years, from whether they're low budget, big budget, from anywhere in the world, there are a few scenes that actually present like fresh twists on familiar themes. And one of my favorite recurring motifs throughout the action genre is the training sequence, especially if you're in a training sequence where the hero's been injured or crippled or basically just like diminished in some way, and they got to build themselves back up. Like Rocky IV has some great training sequences, but like Hard to Kill with Steven Seagal, like where he wakes up out of a coma and has to slowly rehabilitate himself and learn how to heal himself and fight again and that sort of thing. And in this movie, like after the first major action scene, there is a portion where the movie has to kind of calm down, take a breath, exhale, and he does go through a really cool training sequence where with the how can I say this without spoiling anything? Well, I'll just say, due to the movie's emphasis on Indian music and using music to tell stories, they find a way to kind of time his training to this music, and I just found it to be delightful. It was really cool, and I was like, all right, you are showing me something that I don't often see in an action flick. But I've been ranting quite a bit at this point without saying anything negative, so let's offer this movie a few criticisms. And once again, like I said at the beginning, I don't want to oversell the movie, I don't want to overstate the case, and maybe just by just acknowledging some of its flaws, well then we can kill both birds with one stone. But the movie is a little slow at times, perhaps it's a little overly long. Like I would never presume to tell Dev Patel where to cut and where not to, but if he had removed 15 or 20 minutes from the running time, I would not have complained. Also, there's some scenes where he's kind of exploring the underworld for the incredibly wealthy and the incredibly powerful, and there's drugs and women and guns, and you're basically seeing like incredibly powerful, incredibly dangerous people like letting their hair down and they're just partying, and they're trying to communicate the idea that like this is like a den of sin where like anything goes, and yet all these beautiful women, and there's some women in this movie that are so jaw-droppingly beautiful that they will absolutely blow your goddamn mind. In particular, actress Sobita Dhulipala, who she's so beautiful that it'll like make the skin melt off your face. So she's like, oh my lord. In any case, when you're watching all this kind of sin and hell raising and vice and that sort of thing, they do tap the brakes when it comes to like nudity or suggestive content. And there's like a few scenes where you can tell, like, if you look like real hard off in the background, you might see somebody getting a lap dance. But I was like, you know what? If you're trying to sell me on the idea that, like, this is like, a den of sin with every vice imaginable, it's got to seem more hardcore than just walking into your average gentleman's club, anywhere in the world. So I could feel them tapping the brakes when it comes to on-screen sexuality, but I won't say it more than made up for the lack of nudity with a lot of on-screen brutality. But if what you want or what you crave is just bone-crunching violence, well, then that's what the movie is going to deliver. And my last so-called criticism is going to be a little vague and insubstantial, but there's no getting around the fact that at the very end of the movie, I won't say I was disappointed, but I guess when I saw the trailer and I saw the poster and I was getting myself all excited, in my mind I was thinking, all right, this is going to be like one of the coolest goddamn movies in years, and it's going to like change the way we look at the action genre. And I don't know why I kind of in my mind built up this kind of colossal experience ahead of time, which is totally unfair to the movie because they were just trying to deliver a good old-fashioned, solid genre film. And that's exactly what they did. But if you're expecting a movie with like enormous hidden meaning or depth, like perhaps some other people will see that depth or fine meaning where I did not, but I just really enjoyed the experience. But it's not something where I had to like do a lot of soul searching, or I don't know if it's going to require a lot of like debate or discussion. It's going to be like, oh my God, wasn't it cool when he threw that roundhouse kick and like broke that dude's ribs? Or wasn't it cool when he like bit onto a knife and shoved it into somebody's neck? Like, people are just going to be talking about the beats. And once again, it's like, that's all you really need. Like, it's cool when an action movie has something extra and goes above and beyond, but sometimes all the action genre needs to be is entertaining, and that is precisely what this movie is. But here's something I just discovered, which is making my admiration for the movie soar even higher. The budget was only $10 million. That is absolutely astonishing. And in spite of all the various problems that are being faced by the movie business right now, where you've got a loss of interest or basically an entire generation that's falling out of love with movies, or franchises that are just in a state of total disarray, but I'm starting to see the reemergence of the mid-budget film, like movies between maybe like $10 and $30 million that are genre films that deliver, where they're not trying to be all things to all people. They're trying to be one very intense experience to like the most diehard fans. And like Godzilla Minus One, which was made for only a fraction more money. Another great example, a good genre film that made the genre fans very, very happy. And I feel like if there's any hope or future for the movie biz or the art form of cinema, people are going to have to rediscover the joys of making these movies for $10, $20, $30 million, where the movie is very pure and uncompromised in its intentions, very pure and uncompromised in its style and the story that it's telling. My biggest problem with a lot of these big budget movies is that they feel like they're trying to be all things to all people, and they're just so goddamn boring. If you're trying to be all things to all people, then nobody's all that satisfied. Like, over the last 10 or 15 years, how many movies that are like $200 million or more can you say that you fucking love? Like, love, like you want to like go to bed with a Blu-ray and like sleep with that under your pillow, where it's like, a movie that you're going to be obsessed with the rest of your life. They're probably a handful, but I feel like if you look at a history and the best movies ever made, very few of them are at the upper bound limit of economic feasibility. Most of those movies, they kind of drive the engine, but no one really likes the movies that much. And I don't know, maybe I'm getting lost up my own ass, getting up on my high horse. I just love seeing a movie that's only got $10 million, like getting this kind of hype, getting this kind of push. And if this movie does well, then hopefully Jordan Peele, Universal, and Dev Patel, they will get the band back together and make another one. Not necessarily another Monkey Man, just another original film, because we suffer from an alarming shortage of original movies. Movies that are based on an original screenplay. Like, hey, that's a cool read. That will make a good movie. I'm so exhausted by and bored by endless franchise extensions, reboots, sequels to reboots, reimaginings. I mean, 99, like, if you were to run a YouTube channel where you saw no movies but just reviewed every single big budget franchise movie and just said that it sucks ass, 95% of the time you'd be totally right. Like, you wouldn't even have to see the movie. Say, saw the movie, fucking sucked. I don't think people should go. Yeah, like people say like a broken clock is right twice a day. Well, if you say a big budget movie is terrible, Well, then you're probably right the great majority of the time. But with movies that are in like the 10 to 30 million range, well, then you never know. This is how you get future filmmakers who are prepared for and ready for those big opportunities. You practice with the smaller movies until your ship comes in. So once again, Dev Patel, how old is this guy? I think of him as a perpetual boy because I first saw him in Slumdog Millionaire, but 33 years old. I mean, what a badass. I feel like for the next 10, 15, 20 years, if he wants to, he could just keep making action movies. I don't think that's what he'll do, but like he now has that in his back pocket where he doesn't just have to do dramas or shows like what was that show on HBO, The Newsroom. Like he doesn't have to necessarily do stuff like that. He's expanded his range, and I imagine he's going to be getting a lot more interesting offers from a lot of people moving forward. But my hope is that he will continue to develop and direct his own material, and maybe he'll appear in it, maybe he won't. But after seeing this movie, I think it's safe to say the best is probably yet to come in the career of young Dev Patel. So I think I've showered enough praise on him in this movie at this point. Hopefully I didn't overstay my welcome or overstate the case, but looking forward to hearing what people have to say about this movie after they've had a chance to see it. But if you enjoyed this review, please remember to ring the bell, hit subscribe, like the video, leave a comment, all that stuff. You know the drill. But I hope everybody has an amazing weekend at the movies, but more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.